A $150 metal box with a fan and a water pump can cool a room by 30 degrees Fahrenheit. No compressor, no refrigerant, no chemical process. Just water evaporating from a wet pad, the same physics your body uses when you sweat. The central air conditioner doing the same job in the same room draws 14 times the electricity. It costs $5,000 to install. It needs replacing every 15 years. For 40 years, every home in the American desert used the cheap option until the expensive option replaced it. Not because it worked better, but because it could be sold, serviced, and billed monthly. The cheap one is still on the shelf, and almost nobody under 40 knows it exists. The device is called an evaporative cooler. Out west, people call it a swamp cooler. The reason it disappeared has almost nothing to do with whether it works. The principle behind this is older than written language. The Egyptians figured it out around 2500 BC. Servants fanned air across clay jars filled with water. The air passed over the wet surface, lost heat, and arrived cooler on the other side. In Persia, wind towers funneled hot air down through underground channels where it passed over water and dropped 20 or 30 degrees before entering the building. In India, they hung wet grass mats, called coos curtains, across open doorways. Every civilization that dealt with serious heat independently landed on the same answer. Evaporation pulls heat out of air. That is not a theory. That is a track record measured in millennia. The modern version is barely more complicated. Hot outside air gets pulled through pads soaked in water. As the air moves through, the water evaporates, and that phase change, liquid turning to vapor, pulls heat energy out of the air. The Department of Energy puts the cooling range at 15 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the climate. No chemical cycle. Just a fan, a small pump circulating water over the pads, and physics. And here is something that surprised me. The air coming out of this box is not recirculated. It is fresh outside air, pulled through the pads, cooled, and pushed into your house. Your windows stay cracked open, the system needs an exhaust path, and the entire volume of air in your home turns over every few minutes. Central air conditioning does the opposite. It seals your house shut and recirculates the same stale air through the same filter, hour after hour. Anyone who has spent a long afternoon in a sealed, air-conditioned room and felt that flat, dry, headachy staleness knows exactly what I am talking about. The swamp cooler does not do that. It breathes. Now, the reason this works so well in dry climates is the same reason it struggles in humid ones. Evaporation needs room. In dry air, water evaporates fast and pulls a lot of heat with it. When the air is already heavy with moisture, evaporation slows. The cooling effect shrinks. That is the real limitation, and I will come back to it. But first, let me put some numbers on this, because this is where it stopped being interesting to me and started feeling like something people should know about. The University of Arizona ran a study through their Climas program, comparing the two systems in a 2,000 square foot home in Tucson. The evaporative cooler used 250 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. The central air conditioner used 850. Same house, same summer, 70% less electricity. On a watt-for-watt basis, the gap is even wider. The cooler draws about 250 watts while running. A central air conditioning compressor pulls 3,500 watts. That is 1/14 the power draw for the same comfort. Here is what that looks like on a bill. The cooler ran about $150 in electricity over a full summer. The air conditioner ran $600. Add roughly $54 in water for the cooler. Total, $204 versus $600. $400 a year, every year, just sitting on the table. And the cooler cost half as much to install in the first place. A typical central air conditioning system runs $3,800 to $7,500 installed. A whole house, evaporative cooler, the rooftop mounted kind that ducts into every room, runs $500 to $1,500. A window mount unit that cools a room or a section of the house costs $150 to $400. It plugs into a standard outlet. No heating, ventilation, and air conditioning license. No permit, no refrigerant lines through your walls. Those numbers are not from a fringe study. The Department of Energy confirms it. Evaporative coolers use about 1/4 of the energy of conventional air conditioning and cost about half as much to install. And what you find when you follow that trail is not what most people expect. This is not a new invention the industry has failed to catch up to. This is the opposite. This is an old technology that an entire region of America built its life around and then walked away from. In 1908, a man named Oscar Palmer in Phoenix, Arizona, built the first commercial evaporative cooler. Within 25 years, thousands of homemade versions had appeared across the Southwest. Wet burlap stretched over window frames. Damp sheets hung in front of electric fans. By 1939, most homes and businesses in the southwestern United States were using some form of evaporative cooling. Phoenix alone had more than 30 companies manufacturing coolers by 1940. The city called itself the AIR conditioning capital of the world. They were not talking about compressors. This was air conditioning, the original kind. And for decades, it was enough. The thing that made life in the desert livable at a price ordinary families could afford. Then Willis Carrier's invention caught up. Carrier had patented mechanical refrigerant air conditioning back in 1902, but for half a century it stayed commercial, serving movie theaters, department stores, and factories. The residential window unit did not arrive until the late 1940s. Central air for homes came in the mid-1950s, and even then, adoption was slow. By 1960, only 1/4 of Phoenix homes had refrigerated air conditioning. 3 out of 4 families were still on evaporative coolers. Then 2 things happened at once. In 1965, a construction strike in Phoenix halted new home building. Contractors pivoted to retrofitting existing homes, and the most popular retrofit was ripping out the swamp cooler and putting in refrigerated air. At the same time, cheap post-war electricity, GI Bill financing, and the suburban building boom were creating an entire housing model built around the duct and compressor system. The developers mass-producing tract homes were not installing swamp coolers. They were installing central air conditioning. It was more expensive, and it used more electricity, and it could be manufactured, financed, serviced, and billed for every month for the life of the house. By 1980, the swamp cooler had gone from default to relic. Today, only about 7% of Phoenix homes still use one. The rest pay 4 times the operating cost for the same comfort in the same climate. That number stopped me. And then the technology got saddled with the worst possible name. Early evaporative coolers used aspen wood fiber pads. If you did not clean them, the wet wood rotted. Algae grew in the reservoir. Bugs moved in. The whole unit started to smell like a marsh. People started calling them swamp coolers. The name stuck. Try selling a homeowner a swamp cooler when the alternative is called air conditioning. One sounds like something from a catalog. The other sounds like a problem under your porch. The name alone did more damage to this technology than any competing product ever could. Alright, so here's where I need to level with you, because this is where most channels covering this kind of thing lose me. An evaporative cooler does not work everywhere. That is not a footnote. That is the central fact of the technology, and skipping it would be dishonest. At 10% humidity, in deep desert, midsummer Phoenix, you get a 25 to 30 degree drop in temperature, degrees Fahrenheit. At 20% humidity, 20 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. At 40% humidity, about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Still meaningful. Still cheaper than air conditioning by a wide margin. But above 50% humidity, diminishing returns. Above 60% humidity, barely anything. And in Houston, Miami, Atlanta, and most of the eastern half of the country, where summer humidity runs 60 to 80%, this box is not going to cool your house. It is going to make it damp. That is real. That is physics. And that is the honest reason most of America moved to refrigerant air conditioning. But here is what that framing misses. The western and mountain states, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, the Central Valley of California, West Texas, and parts of Montana and Wyoming, sit in exactly the climate this technology was designed for. Tens of millions of people, and most of them are paying $600 a summer to run a compressor, when a box costing a fraction of the price would do the same job for $204. Not because the box does not work, because the system around it moved on. Nobody suppressed this. I want to be clear about that because it matters. Evaporative coolers are on the shelf at Lowe's right now. You can order one online tonight. The Department of Energy recommends them. This is not a banned technology or a buried patent. What happened is simpler than suppression and harder to fix. The entire HVAC ecosystem, contractors, supply chains, building codes, reorganized around the compressor. The US HVAC market generates over $30 billion a year. 88% of American homes have air conditioning. Contractor certifications are built around refrigerant handling. Financing is built around equipment installs costing $5,000 to $15,000. A swamp cooler has no service contract. There's no refrigerant to recharge. There's no annual tune-up that generates a $200 invoice. The pads cost $20 and you swap them yourself once a season. The pump costs $30 if it dies. End of summer maintenance is draining the reservoir, wiping down the housing, and letting it dry 20 minutes in the driveway. Compare that to the $150 to $300 air conditioning technician visit your system needs every spring just to check refrigerant levels and hose off the condenser. The contractor who tells you about a $150 box just eliminated the $5,000 install. That is not a conspiracy. It is just math that nobody in the chain has a reason to solve for you. And there is one more thing the air conditioning industry pulled off that almost never gets talked about. They redefined a word. Air conditioning used to mean any system that conditions the air, heats it, cools it, filters it, humidifies it. The original air conditioners in the American Southwest were evaporative. That is what the word meant. The refrigerant industry took that word and made it mean a compressor. They made it mean a sealed box and a $5,000 price tag. The swamp cooler got linguistically evicted from its own category. Nobody planned that. It is just what happens when one side has a marketing budget and the other side is a metal box with wet pads. So what does buying one actually look like? A portable evaporative cooler, the kind you wheel from room to room, runs $100 to $250. Fill the reservoir with water, plug it into a wall outlet, and point it where you want cooler air. Operating cost is $20 to $30 a month. No installation, no permit, no technician. A window mount unit, the kind that cools an entire room or a section of a house, runs $150 to $400. It mounts the same way a window AC unit does, except it is lighter and simpler and has no refrigerant lines. Connect it to a garden hose for continuous water or fill the reservoir by hand. These move serious air, 3,000 to 5,000 cubic feet per minute. You crack a window on the far side of the room to give the air somewhere to go, and the whole space turns over with fresh, cooled air every few minutes. A whole house system, rooftop mounted and ducted through the ceiling, runs $500 to $1,500 installed. That is the exact setup that cooled every home in Phoenix for 40 years. It is still available. It still works. It still costs a fraction of central AC. And if you are in a climate that gets dry spells and humid spells, you do not have to choose. Use the evaporative cooler during the dry months when it is at its best and your electricity savings are the highest. Switch to AC when the monsoon arrives or humidity spikes above 50%. Some homes in Arizona have run both systems for decades. The cooler handles the long dry stretch and the AC handles the humid weeks. Your annual cooling bill drops by roughly half compared to running AC alone. That is not a workaround. That is the smart way to cool a house in a mixed climate, and almost nobody sets it up that way because nobody in the HVAC industry makes money recommending it. You turn it on for the first time on a June afternoon. It is 103 degrees Fahrenheit outside and the air is bone dry. You hear the fan spin up and the pump starts circulating water over the pads. Within minutes, the air pushing into the room is cool against your hand. Not the hard, dry cold of air conditioning, something different, softer. Like standing near a lake with a breeze coming off the water. The air smells faintly clean, not recirculated, not filtered through the same ducts for the 10th time today. Fresh. Your electricity meter barely moves. No compressor cycling on and off. No condenser dumping heat into your backyard. Just water, doing what water has always done, pulling heat out of the air as it disappears into vapor. Here's what I keep coming back to. The places getting hotter fastest are the places this technology was built for. The western states, the desert, the regions where humidity is low and electricity demand is spiking every summer. The Department of Energy projects global cooling demand to triple by 2050. And the solution everyone is reaching for, the compressor, the refrigerant, the sealed system, is the one that uses the most electricity and generates the most waste heat. Every air conditioning unit in Phoenix dumps its heat back into the air outside the building. Every unit makes the city hotter. Every unit makes the next unit work harder. It is a feedback loop that gets worse the more people buy in. An evaporative cooler does not dump heat. It consumes it. The energy goes into changing water from liquid to vapor. It does not come back out the other side of the wall. And the refrigerants inside air conditioning systems, the hydrofluorocarbons that leak out over the life of the unit, are greenhouse gases hundreds of times more potent than carbon dioxide. The evaporative cooler's working fluid is water. One system makes the problem it is solving incrementally worse. The other one does not. 118 years ago, a man in Phoenix built a box with wet pads and a fan, and it made the desert livable. That technology is still on the shelf. The physics has not changed. The price has barely moved. The only thing that changed is what we decided to call air conditioning, and who profits from that definition. If that is the kind of thing worth knowing, subscribe. There is more coming.